the thread that connects you to your Iṣṭa-devatā doesn't come from your mind. So it doesn't come from a practice of rational, logical thinking, right? Like I need more financial wealth right now, so I'm gonna, do you know what I mean? That's very different. That's a smart practice to do, but it's different than that. The Iṣṭa-devatā is like the deity that perfectly mirrors and matches the longing of your heart for that lifetime. Right? And so, Ma used to say, it doesn't mean that that can't change at different times, right? Like if you're sitting in meditation and you typically, like you said, you love the goddess Kali, but if the goddess Tara shows up, or Krishna shows up, or Buddha shows up, or Christ shows up, you gonna say no? No, right? Because it's really, it all comes from the same essence. And so it's kind of a wild practice, because I think a lot of times people feel like, God, I don't know who my beloved is. Sometimes people have a very strong sense of it. And sometimes people have a strong sense of it and it starts to shift and change. And so I believe as long as you're practicing getting quiet enough to listen to that thread of the heart, that, how did we do a thing, a whole weekend we did once on following the thread of Shakti, right? You follow that longing of the heart, and I don't think you can go wrong. I really don't think you can go wrong. And even if it gets confusing and it changes sometimes, or if you love the formless, the forms are foreign to you, or you love all the forms and you can't choose, right? It's like a parade going through something like that. It's like, oh my God, how am I supposed to pick one? This is crazy making, right? I think that's all okay. I think that's part of the gorgeousness of the sacred. In the chakras, they say the 1,000 petals in the 1,000-petaled lotus at the top of the head, those represent 1,000 different ways you could get to God in any one lifetime. Right? So you figure you got 1,000 chances, maybe you got 1,000 different Iṣṭa-devatas hanging around up there, trying to knock you on the head and get your attention. But I like to play around with it, but I really do think that it's that. I think it's one of the purposes of spiritual longing is to be able to find that. Because when you feel a resonance with that feeling of an Iṣṭa-devatā, it feels like this. It feels like there's a familiarity and a love and a longing that's met. That feeling of when you long for something, it's like that when your mind finally shuts up in meditation, finally stops the barrage of thoughts, and you get that quiet moment of bliss, and you feel like, oh my God, there it is, right? That moment when you just feel whole, you feel like you've just connected, right? That's that love of Iṣṭa-devatā. That's the so I actually feel like spiritual longing, the part of the purpose of spiritual longing is to lead you into that depth, which is going to entice you onto the cushion, right, into the meditation. It's going to actually entice you to want to sit instead of to feel like you should sit. It's a very different practice when you start to long for the peace that comes when you do the practices, instead of just longing for the like the talking about the practice, or all the stuff around the practice. Like you actually start to want to go into that deep quiet space and drink as you pour. Like you actually want to drink in that ecstasy and that silence, and you allow yourself to get it, to touch it and to get it. And that's really kind of that point when you can go from living with the mind that says the cup is half empty to living with the mind. It actually changes your mind, can start to acknowledge that the cup is half full. Right, so those teachings, that Ishta Devata, it's juicy. It's juicy stuff, you know? It's juicy stuff. So I love the question. I love talking about it. I love teaching about it. I love you all. Namaste.
Namaste.